Hey bug farmers, welcome to Bug Farmer Beekeeping, where we dive into the world of apiculture, beekeeping, and bees every week. This is the place to share laughs, explore bees, and learn together, all without taking ourselves too seriously. To join our buzzing community, it's easy and it's free. Just hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, and let's cultivate beekeeping knowledge and fun together. Now, let's get into the bees. Hi, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos. This is not going to be a romanticized version of what a beekeeper is. We're not going to paint a picture of a beekeeper walking over the hill and going into his apiary with the sun cresting over the hill and mist on the ground and dew dropping off the leaves and the beekeeper holding up his frame of glistening honey dripping off of it. It's not this video. In this video, we're going to talk about the hidden side of beekeeping, what we beekeepers don't, not that we don't tell you, we just don't focus on it. And that's going to be the challenges of beekeeping that we all beekeepers have to deal with, but we don't focus on it in videos primarily because we're optimistic. We love bees. We're passionate about the hobby, so we look at the bright side all the time. But there are some hidden challenges to beekeeping that we show you in all of our videos. We don't belabor the point. We don't focus on it. I'm going to give you a list today of some of the hidden challenges of beekeeping so that you can go into this hobby with your eyes wide open. Now, if you're an experienced beekeeper and I miss something, which I'm probably going to miss a lot, do me a favor, put it down in the comments below. This video is really aimed at newbies, people who are just getting into the hobby or are thinking about getting into the hobby. We want to make sure that they come into the hobby with all of the information, just not dreams of grandeur and gallons of honey just pouring out everywhere. There's a little bit more to it than that, and that's what I'm going to try to convey in this video. So, some of the hidden challenges of beekeeping. One of the biggest ones I'm going to have to say is pests. I mean, there are pests that get into a hive. We have to deal with varroa mites. We have to deal with hive beetles. We have to deal with mice trying to get into our hives. And we have to deal with disease. But the biggest one out of all of those that I mentioned, well, in my opinion, there's two big ones. But the biggest one that affects everybody, including our friends in New Zealand and Australia. Now, they were immune to it for a long time, but now they're not, and that's the varroa mite. The varroa destructor, it's got a great name, the varroa destructor. Anyways, the varroa mite it's a mite, it's a parasite that gets on bees, and they pick it up out in the wild when they're out foraging, and they bring it back to the hive. And in the hive, the varroa, they will multiply, they will lay their eggs, and they will get up underneath the comb of pupating brood, and they will decimate a hive. I mean, they can really wipe out your bees and cause such a problem that your bees will abscond if they get too many in the hive. They can't get them off of them, or they could cause your entire colony to collapse. It's not a good thing to have varroa mites in your colony. The worst thing that can possibly happen is your bees get sick because the varroa mites can introduce viruses into your colony. That's something that you do not want. Now, as beekeepers, we do have tools in our tool bag where we can deal with a varroa, but before we can deal with them, we have to identify whether or not we have a varroa problem. Now, before I go any farther, I'm going to say that I am a beekeeper, that I don't do any of the testing to determine whether or not I've got a varroa problem. I just do the treatment. I treat 3 times a year, regardless of whether I test or not, regardless of whether I've identified that I have a mite or not. I will provide the treatment to the bees. I've not realized any adverse effects from just giving them a treatment, but I have found mites on the bottom board, dead mites, after every treatment. So I can say that I've always had mites. Now, some of the ways that beekeepers actually test to see if they have mites, one of the main methods out there is an alcohol wash, and they actually sell a jar. It's an apparatus that you can use to do the alcohol wash, and you take a cup of bees, you put it in the jar, you put some isopropyl alcohol in there, and you shake the bees. Now, it is going to sacrifice some bees for the good of the colony. You're going to lose a cup of bees, but the mites will fall off of the bees and down into the bottom of the jar where you can count the mites to determine whether you have a problem. Now, if you don't want to use alcohol, you can use soapy water, but it will have the same effect. It will kill the bees, but it will allow you to see how many mites you have in the colony. Now, there is a less invasive method where you don't actually have to kill bees. You can do the same thing. You just use powdered sugar, and at the end, the bees will groom themselves, and when they groom themselves, they're going to drop the mites off of their body, and at the end, you just go through the powdered sugar that is left behind, and you count mites, and you can determine whether or not you have a problem. Now, again, the toolkit is not empty. We have ways of treating the mites, and one of the most popular ways, my favorite way right now, is oxalic acid, which is a vaporization of oxalic acid that you put in the hives. Now, it takes several treatments per treatment window. I like to say treatment window because you have to catch the bees with oxalic acid at all stages of development. And you can learn a lot about oxalic acid by watching other YouTube videos. That's not what this video is about. But OA is a great way to treat, and that's my treatment of choice at this point. But there are other ways, Apivar strips or other medications that you can put, or miticides. There are pesticides for inside your hive that you can use that will get rid of the varroa mite. And it's important that you do so because varroa mites can also introduce not just a colony collapse, not just causing your bees to abscond, but they can introduce a virus into your hive. Now, a virus in your hive is a pretty big deal, and they do make antibiotics to treat bees or bee colonies that have, they've got a cold, they're running around, they got little thermometers out of their mouths, they've got a fever, they have antibiotics to treat those colonies. But there is one type of virus that can get in your hive that can decimate not just your colony, not just that hive, but every hive in your apiary and neighboring apiaries, and that's American foul brood. Now, there is a European foul brood, and I don't know a whole lot about that. I have to do some more research. I don't know everything about bees. I'm only doing this for 7 years now, but I am learning, and I'm going to try to share with you what I've learned. But the one that you really have to worry about is the American foul brood, because if you get American foul brood, you can't just treat your bees and go on like nothing happened. You actually have to burn your hive, burn your equipment that those bees were in, and immediately start treating with antibiotics any neighboring hives, because failure to do so could cause the American foul brood to actually spread throughout your apiary and then into neighboring apiaries. So it's a serious one. That one, that's a hidden challenge that could really destroy not just your season, but destroy your whole apiary, if you have a small honey business, it can wipe it out because you'll have to purchase all new equipment. And equipment, as you know, it costs a little bit of money, and we accumulate it over time. And the last thing you want to do is set it ablaze. Okay, so now that we've talked about varroa, we've talked about American foul brood, let's talk about my personal nemesis. Well, I mean, before we talk about my personal nemesis, there's another invader you have to worry about, that's ants. Ants, they love honey. You've got basically boxes of sugar sitting out there, so you're going to have to deal with ants. You can treat the ground around your hives with diatomaceous earth. That will help you get rid of the ants because it basically cuts their little legs up when they're walking around. Personally, I don't use it because I don't want to accidentally cut the little legs up of my bees if they decide to walk around on the ground. So I don't use diatomaceous earth, but a lot of people do. And you can also use, there's pesticides out there that will kill ants and not bees. They're bee-friendly ones out there. And some people can say, oh my God, he said use pesticides. Yes, use pesticides like Grub-X to get rid of hive beetles if you have them, which is really the coup de grace. I mean, for me, hive beetles is that's where it's at, because as a southern beekeeper, or if you live in a hot and humid environment, you are going to suffer from hive beetles. Now, some folks up north don't really have to deal with them, but we people in the south, the hive beetles are no fun. I've dealt with hive beetles to the point where I've actually developed the Beetle Sucker 5000, which allows me to go into a hive and suck all the hive beetles out of it because they are so bad that they can actually slime your hive. What the hive beetles will do is they will get up into your hive, they will start eating the pollen. They love the protein, and that's what they're attracted to. And they will start laying eggs. And once they lay those eggs are going to pupate and turn into a larva. That larva is going to get all over your hive and all over your honey, and it's going to get down to the bottom board, and it's going to try to wiggle itself out onto the ground, where it goes into the ground itself and pupates, and then it turns into a hive beetle, and then it comes back up into your hive and starts the whole cycle all over again. And what this can do is slime your hive. Now, I did not coin that phrase. That is a Mike Berry phrase. And if you're new to beekeeping and you're just starting to get into beekeeping videos, go visit Mike Berry. He'll tell you all about slimed hives with hive beetles, because he's the guy who introduced me to the term sliming, but the beetles themselves introduced me to sliming because they slimed my hives. That's something that you really have to worry about as a beekeeper, and that's something that we also have tools in the toolbox. There's ways to prevent the beetles from getting into your hive, so they say. I've tried a lot of things, didn't really work. The Beetle Sucker 5000 can remove them in a hurry, but my treatment of choice right now is something called Grub-X, and that's something that I use. And it's a grub medicine. I guess you put it down in the ground around your hive and around the apiary. And when the hive beetles jump into the ground, or they wiggle themselves off the bottom board and fall into the ground, they dig into the ground to pupate, and they can't. It kills them, and then you don't have the hive beetles coming back up. It kind of breaks the cycle. I've been using GrubX for a couple of years, and I have to say, I love it. Highly recommend it to any beekeeper who has to deal with hive beetles. Now, another hidden challenge that we beekeepers face is weather. I mean, the weather happens, right? I mean, we can't control the weather. It's a variable that's outside of our control, and we have good seasons and we have bad seasons. Now, a good season is when you get just the right amount of rain in the spring, and then just the right amount of rain in the summer, and just the right amount of rain in the fall to make sure that the flowers can grow, the flowers can bloom, the flowers can produce nectar. They need rain to do that. And your bees can collect that nectar and turn it into honey so they can feed the colony, and so that you can feed your honey jars and all of the people who buy your honey. So rain is something that we can't control. We can't control the weather. If you get too much rain and you're swamped with rain, well, now none of the flowers can produce. There's any nectar that is in the flower, it's going to be diluted with water, and the bees can't really fly in the rain. Well, some of them do a little bit, but for the most part, they don't fly in the rain, and that could really decimate your season, almost as bad as if you had no rain at all, because years where we have droughts, well, you might have a nice spring and the flowers might pop up, but they may not have enough moisture to be able to offer nectar to the bees to come and pollinate them. So weather is an unseen variable that we have to deal with, and it's an unforeseen challenge that we really can't control. Every year, we all just sit back and hope for the best. Now we've talked about the pests, and now that we've talked about the varroa and the viruses and all of the bad stuff that can happen, and the weather, let's talk about something else that we really don't focus on in beekeeping. But I tell you what, if you watch the videos and you look, you're going to notice that a lot of us beekeepers are doing this a lot. Our backs hurt. Beekeeping is very physical work. Now, if you have a couple of hives in your backyard, that's not a bad thing. It's not going to really be too strenuous, but a full box of honey, if you have a 10-frame hive, you're looking at 50, 60 pounds. And if you have 3 boxes of honey on each hive, come harvest time, you're moving that 60 pounds 3 times for each hive. That's a lot of work. And then you got to move those 5-gallon buckets, which are 50 to 60 pounds apiece, filled with honey around your garage, around your house, whatever. Then you got to bottle it and move the cases. There's a lot of work to it. And if you just have a couple of hives in your backyard, that's one thing. But if you have 20 hives or 30 hives or 40 hives, you see where I'm going here. The more you improve your honey production, the more you decimate your back. I mean, I don't know of any beekeepers that don't have a bad back. I certainly have a bad back, and I was foolish enough to start this hobby with a bad back, but I didn't really think about it. Nobody told me. I found out for myself, and now you know it's very labor intensive, and it's not just the lifting. It's the repetitious of movement. You're lifting up, you're moving over, you're lifting up, you're moving over. You're going to have a backache, so make friends with your bottle of ibuprofen. And finally, the last hidden challenge of beekeeping is maintaining our equipment. There's a lot of work that goes into beekeeping during the season, but right now is the off season. I'm down here in my basement, and you can't see it on camera, but I've got my workbenches around me surrounded with hives and beekeeping things. I've got to clean the frames. I've got to clean my boxes. I've got to make sure that I've got foundation waxed. I've got to build new frames. I've got to build new boxes. There's a lot of work that goes into the beekeeping in the off season. And it's something that I wasn't prepared for, although I knew that I wanted to maintain my boxes to get the most life out of them. And that was okay when I had 2 hives in my backyard, and then I had 4, and then I had 6, because bees like to swarm, and when they swarm, they pretty much double in size. So every year, if you don't manage it, your apiary will double in size. I look at it as free bees and more honey, because my goal is to double the size of my apiary every year. But the backyard beekeeper, that might not be their goal. So you really have to manage your swarms. And that's another hidden challenge of beekeeping, but that's for another video, or possibly another YouTube beekeeper, because there's a lot of videos out there on preventing swarms. But maintaining your equipment over the winter and preparing for each season is a lot of work. When I first got into this, I thought that I was going to have to put the bees out, forget about them, never ever deal with them, and then once a year grab the honey. Actually, I started out with flow hives. I thought I was just going to turn the key and get a jar of honey. It was all going to be, that was it. That was all going to be done for me. I was going to have honey. I was going to be able to sell it, provide it to my family and friends, and it was all going to be great. And yes, that did happen, but there's a lot of work that I didn't see coming that I'm kind of warning you about right now. You are going to be working in the off months to prepare for spring. Me, I'm in the South. I've got about 3 months where my bees are out in the bee yard doing their thing, trying to stay warm. And I've got about 3 months to prepare before I'm back out in the bee yard, setting up new hives, setting up new supers, and making sure that everything is humming right along and that my bees are ready to produce a lot of honey for me in the season, if the weather will allow it. So with all of that said, I'm going to leave you with one more thing, because I should have mentioned this in pests, and I should have mentioned this in maintenance, but because this has to do with maintenance and pests, I'm going to give you the bonus. The bonus is wax moths. Wax moths are something that you're going to have to deal with that you're not going to like at all. In beekeeping, drawn comb is as good as gold. It's better than honey to have drawn comb, because if you have drawn comb, your bees don't have to recreate, they don't have to build a house before they can start packing it with furniture every single year. They move right in and start bringing in the honey. You extract the honey, then they fill it up again. That's the way it goes. So comb is like gold. And something that I was unaware of when I started beekeeping, another hidden challenge of beekeeping, is battling the wax moths. And I'm going to give you the solution to this, because I learned the solution from Jeff Horchoff in Louisiana, Mr. Ed. He gave me the solution, and until I went down to help him with an extraction, I did not know what the solution was to wax moths. But before I give you the solution, I'm going to give you the problem. And the problem is this. Wax moths in general, love to get into beehives because they want the protein that is left over in the frames where there was brood. If there was brood or pollen stored in the frames, you're going to have a wax moth problem with those frames if you do not address it with some sort of moth repellent. I forget what it was that I used, but I use moth crystals, and there's a specific kind that you have to get. I'm not sure what that is off the top of my head, but you can do some research and find out. You'll have to put moth crystals on your old brood frames that you are storing over the winter, or any old frames that have had pollen in them, because if you don't, you're going to get wax moths, and wax moths will destroy your comb. They will even eat into the wood and destroy the wood on your frame. So wax moths, bad, you don't want them. And the solution is that when you are doing your harvest, and it's your last harvest of the year and you're about to store stuff, store your frames that have never had brood or pollen in them separately from the rest of the frames. Ideally, what you would want to do, if you have the ability to do it, is you would want to take any brood frames that you're going to be storing, or frames that had pollen in them that you're going to be storing, and not store those at all. Scrape them off, melt the wax, use the wax to re-wax your foundation the next year. Wax moths, for some reason, well, I mean, it's not for some reason, I mean, it's a very good reason. There's no food value there. They don't seem to attack the frames that you're storing that have only ever had honey in them. If it's only ever had honey and you don't see any dark areas of the frame, the wax moths aren't going to get it. I've got some frames that I put away last year that have no pollen in them, no brood stains in them where there was brood reared in them, and they are in great shape right now. And by the same token, I've got some that actually had some brood or pollen in it, and they're decimated with wax moths. So that's the final pest that you're going to have to worry about, and the final challenge that I'm going to talk about as far as beekeeping in this video today. There are a lot more out there, and do yourself a favor, leave a comment below and read the comments below, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other challenges that I failed to mention that other beekeepers are going to put in the comments below. So with all of that said, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you found it useful, and I hope it hasn't deterred you from wanting to keep bees. I hope now you can go into beekeeping with your eyes open and really enjoy the hobby, but understand that there's a lot of work involved as well. So again, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up. If you have something to say, by all means, please comment. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, take a moment, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to be notified of my new content. I do try to drop a video every Friday. We try to keep it light and have fun. So with all that said, be happy and I will see you next week. Take care.